Well, officially, the Quebec election is still just over a year away, but we're hearing about nominations that are about happening now, of course, as they get ready for the election campaign. And that's nothing unusual. However, there's one today that is a bit unusual. It is for the PQ nomination in the riding of Sainte-Marie-Saint-Jacques. And someone who is seeking that is a woman by the name of Jennifer Drouin, who is the founder of Anglophones for an Independent Quebec. And she joins me now. Good morning, Jennifer.
Good morning.
Thanks for your time this morning. Is it Drouin? I mean, you're from Nova Scotia. Is there an
If you can
Acadian?
pronounce it correctly in French
Yeah.
as Drouin, that would be great. I also say Drouin. I've got trouble with my R's and my U's in French like most Anglophones do.
Well, those who especially are raised in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
And when did you come to Quebec?
I started coming to Quebec as a visitor in '96,
Okay.
which is about one summer after I started speaking French because I did French immersion at a University of St. Anne and Acadian University in '95, and I've been living here since 2001.
Now, I know you spoke to the PQ Congress a couple of weeks ago, and you described yourself as an immigrant from a neighboring country, Canada.
Yeah.
It,
Because, for a sovereignist, we see Quebec as a pays, a country already. And so Canada is a neighboring country, and I love it. As an English Canadian, I'm not against English Canada in any way. I love English Canada, but I also love Quebec as a separate country.
Before coming on with you, I asked our listeners to give me a list of questions that they want to ask you because I want to, with due respect, obviously, raise these issues because it's kind of odd for an Anglo from outside the province to come here and want to break up the country.
You could say that, I suppose, but I mean, I don't really consider myself as someone from outside the province when I've been here since, 20-some years now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, you have every right to stand for what you stand for. I'm just saying that someone who was raised in Canada comes here and would actually like to see it destroyed. I guess.
Well, I wouldn't say it's destroyed, but I would say that coming from outside of Quebec might give me a better or more unique perspective than people who are born and raised here in, say, the West Island.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing it with fresh eyes, and I'm not influenced by, certain narratives or stories that people who grow up here hear all the time.
Do you think there's a chip on the shoulders of Anglos growing up here?
Well, I mean, you certainly hear stories about, having rights oppressed or whatever. And I come here from Nova Scotia, having spent 6 years living with Acadians on the French shore. And that's when I saw what it's like to try to get healthcare in a second language, where it's here, it's great.
But you're prepared to squash our rights to fight for the Acadian, is that it?
Oh, I wouldn't say squash our rights at all. My whole point is I've lived here and I've never had my rights oppressed in any way, shape, or form in 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, before you got here, going back 40 years, Bill 101 was adopted, and a lot of rights were taken away from the English community, the rights to put up signs, that kind of stuff. And even Francophones lost rights to send their kids to English schools. I mean, don't forget that, Jennifer.
Well, I wouldn't say those are rights taken away. Actually, I gave a speech about this on the 26th of August, which is the 40th anniversary, because I'm actually 42, the same age as the Loisson Inn. And what I pointed out at that time was that Bill 101 didn't take away rights. Bill 101 actually guarantees rights. So if you look through it, which I did as someone who's actually read the law in its entirety and then scanned through it and did a little control F for every time the word English comes up, you see that there's something like 15 or 18, I forget the exact number, of articles in Bill 101 that guarantee English rights. And we're guaranteed rights that aren't necessarily guaranteed, for example, to Francophones in other provinces. So Bill 101 gives us the right to go to school in English. It gives us the right to go to court and have a trial in English, to get the judgment from that trial translated into English if it's rendered in French by the judge, to have documents put in our healthcare files in English. So there are a lot of rights that Bill 101 guarantees and protects, rather than to see it as taking away.
How would you feel about, since we're talking English rights, about making the province bilingual? Since we're one of the two founding, we say one of the founding cultures.
Well, there's the question of two founding nations, and I completely agree with that, except for it always excludes the First Nations. And we always have
that's
to
why I
two
said
founding
one
nations
of.
plus
Yeah.
the First Nations.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I agree with that. So I would be against making Quebec officially bilingual in the sense of New Brunswick is officially bilingual. But, being an official bilingual province doesn't necessarily protect the French language.
Got it.
So the French language in New Brunswick, for instance, is under threat, even though officially it's bilingual, whereas English is never going to go away. We're in North America. We have the rest of English Canada around us. We have the United States next door. English is never going to be under threat, but French is under threat, and it needs to be protected. And so for that reason, Quebec needs to remain officially, legally, a French state, but that doesn't mean like that you can't speak English. Nobody's going to come around and knock on your door and arrest you for speaking English.
Yeah.
We already know that in Montreal, the rate of French speakers, francophones, has declined to approximately 50%. And imagine if only 50% of people in Paris spoke French, or only 50% of people in Berlin spoke German, or only 50% of people in London spoke English. What a loss culturally that would be for each of those countries. So we're trying to protect a culture that's under threat, but it's not an attack against English, because English is doing just fine on its own.
How do you feel about, Jennifer, how do you feel about Charter of Values that was floated and now, is being discussed again?
The Charter on Secularism?
Yeah.
Well, that was rediscussed at the PQ Congress 2 weeks ago, where I was elected to the highest level of the party, the national executive, and we haven't quite. It's going to come out any day now. A revised version of our proposition principale, our primary program.
Is it a little
with all of the changes will be coming out in a couple of weeks. So I'd have to see it.
Is it less radical? Is it less radical and a little more open to people of different religious backgrounds, or no?
Yeah, the version that was adopted 2 weeks ago is different than the version that was presented in the 2012 election. So, for instance, a major change would be to grandfather in any public servant wearing religious symbols already, because the whole debate in 2012 was you're going to take away their jobs. Well, that's no longer on the table. That is completely off the table. Anyone who already works in a public job that would be affected by the Charter of Values, which would have a different name and be a different bill and whatever, would be grandfathered in. So that's a huge difference.
In our last minute, do you get pushback from other members of the English community for where you speak?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, most of, if you mean like my friends and family, like I'm obviously hugely involved at McGill. McGill is kind of like the center of my life, and all of my friends and family know that that I'm involved in politics, and this is what I believe in, and I'm doing it for the good of the people, because a lot of the issues that will be solved by sovereignty are issues that touch daily lives. So we send $50 million in taxes to Ottawa, and there's fiscal inequality is still a problem. And if we were a sovereign country, we would have more money to invest in healthcare and education. And my friends and family know that I stand for the same values as they do, which is to help everyday people and to invest in the things that matter to us, and to not be like, for instance, subsidizing the oil sands in Alberta.
Well, if only we could do all of
that.
Really
don't help the English community here in Montreal.
If only we could do all of that, but keep Canada together. That's what I think a lot of people would say to you.
Well, I'd say Canada's still going to be there. You know what? Like, as an English, I've spent the last 20 years of my life becoming a Shakespeare professor and being involved in English culture and literature. I love it.
Wow.
I turn on CBC and I listen to Rick Mercer the same as every other English Canadian across the country does. I love English Canadian culture, but I also love Quebec culture, and the two can thrive if we get a divorce. There's nothing that says you have to live in the same house and fight when you can be living in separate apartments next door to each other and get along great.
Do you ever worry you might be just a token Anglo and being used by the PQ?
I don't think that at all. I mean, I'm the one who has offered my services to the party because they're values that I believe in. And I would say I'm not a token Anglo in the sense of I'm also not the first Anglo. The Patriots back in 1837, Robert Nelson and Wilford Nelson, fought alongside Francophones, wrote the Declaration of Independence of Lower Canada. There was also several other Anglos in the party in the 80s. There was Henry Milner of Poli Sci Prof.
I remember.
There was David Payne, the deputy of Vachon. So I'm far from the first Anglo to be involved in the PQ. There's always been lots of us, and that's why I formed Anglos for Quebec Independence, to bring us all together as a group so that it wouldn't just be an isolated Anglo here and an isolated Anglo there, but there's actually a whole group of us, and we've always been there all along.
And what's your membership, really quickly? I got to let you go, but how many?
We're around 100 or some.
100. Okay. Jennifer Drouin, running for the PQ nomination in Marie Saint-Jacques. Thanks for your time, Jennifer. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much to you as well.